The shadow creature screeched as Arthur's spear pierced its flank. Not a fatal wound, but enough to send it retreating into the dense undergrowth. Arthur stood motionless, listening to the creature's pained howls fade into the distance. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. 10 years on Xandria had taught him patience. Patience and vigilance, the two virtues that kept him alive on this merciless planet. He pulled his spear from the ground, inspecting the bluish ichor coating its tip. Another day survived. Another predator, taught to fear the strange, pale creature who refused to become prey. Xandria's massive moon hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the twisted landscape. Arthur gathered his hunting gear and began the trek back to his shelter, a reinforced cave system nestled in the foothills of what he called the Razor Mountains, named for their impossibly sharp peaks that seemed to tear at the sky itself. The wreckage of the horizon was visible from his vantage point, a skeletal reminder of the research vessel that had brought him to this world. Scavenged nearly clean over the years, it now served as little more than a landmark, a monument to 28 lives lost, and one that stubbornly continued. Arthur's muscles ached as he climbed the narrow path to his home. At 30, he was in his physical prime, his body hardened by a decade of constant struggle. But Xandria extracted its toll daily. The planet's heavy gravity made every step an effort. Its toxic pollen required him to wear a filtration mask during the blooming seasons. Its predators ensured he never truly slept, but merely rested in alert intervals. He paused at the entrance to his cave, performing the ritual security check that had become second nature. Tripwires intact, alarm system functional, no signs of intrusion. He swept aside the camouflage covering and stepped inside his sanctuary. The interior was Spartan but organized with scientific precision. One section held his meager food stores, dried meat from the antelope-like creatures he called swifts, preserved fruits from the less poisonous plant species, and purified water collected from the morning dew. Another area contained his weapons and tools, handcrafted bows, arrows, spears, and knives, each designed for specific prey. A third space housed his botanical specimens and research notes. His original mission to study Xandria's flora continued, despite everything. Arthur peeled off his leather armor, fashioned from the hide of a thunder lizard he'd killed 3 years ago, and examined a fresh cut on his forearm. Not deep, but in Xandria's bacteria-rich environment, even minor wounds could turn deadly. He cleaned it with antiseptic derived from a local succulent and applied a bandage woven from fibrous plant material. As he prepared his evening meal, his thoughts drifted, as they often did, onto Earth. He wondered if the distress signal from the horizon had ever reached human space, if a rescue mission might still arrive 10 years late. Logic told him no. The ship had been too far off course when it crashed. Their research expedition had ventured beyond established routes, seeking undiscovered worlds for potential colonization. Xandria, with its hostile environment, would never make the list of habitable planets. But Arthur had adapted. The xenobotanist had become a survivor, a hunter, a builder. He'd learned Xandria's rhythms and moods, its deadly seasons and brief moments of extraordinary beauty. He'd also learned about its indigenous species, the Kayar, green-skinned humanoids with large, expressive eyes that reflected the light like polished obsidian. They stood taller than humans, with leaner frames but denser musculature. Their tribal society kept them mostly nomadic, following migration patterns of the larger herbivores they hunted. Arthur maintained a cautious distance from the Kayar, not out of fear, though their physical strength certainly warranted respect, but from a scientist's reluctance to interfere with their natural development. He observed them from afar, learning fragments of their language by listening to hunting parties that occasionally ventured near his territory. They knew of his existence, the pale ghost that haunted the foothills, but seemed content to leave him be, perhaps viewing him with a mixture of curiosity and superstition. That unspoken boundary between their worlds had remained unbroken for nearly a decade. Until today. The small warning bells near his perimeter triggered just as Arthur finished his meal. He grabbed his spear and moved silently to the observation slit carved into the cave wall. Twilight had deepened into night, but Xandria's moon provided enough illumination to see the intruder. A Kayar, small, a child, female judging by the cranial ridges. She moved hesitantly along the path, stopping frequently to look behind her. No adult Kiara accompanied her. Arthur frowned. The nearest Kiara settlement was at least a 2-day journey away. No child would survive Xandria's nighttime predators alone. What was she doing here? The decision to reveal himself went against a decade of caution, but leaving a child to die went against something deeper, the humanity he'd fought to preserve in this inhospitable world. He stepped from the shave, spear lowered but ready. The Kiar child froze, her large eyes widening in recognition or fear, perhaps both. For a long moment they regarded each other in silence. Two species separated by biology and culture, connected only by their isolation on this cruel planet. Then the Kiar child spoke, in halting but recognizable human language. My mother died today. Her voice trembled with grief and exhaustion. Can I spend the day with you, human? The simplicity of the request struck Arthur like a physical blow. How long had it been since he'd heard another voice? How long since anyone had sought his company rather than his blood or his territory? You can stay forever, he said, the words emerging before he could consider their implications. The child didn't move, perhaps not understanding his meaning or not trusting his intention. Arthur tried again, this time in the basic phrases of the KR language he had managed to learn. Safe here? Come. She approached cautiously, stopping just beyond arm's reach. Up close, Arthur could see the signs of her ordeal. Scratches on her green skin, torn clothing, eyes dulled by grief, yet still alert to danger. I am Lyra, she said, switching back to human speech. My mother taught me your words. She said the pale one was not demon, just different people. Arthur nodded slowly, processing this information. Your mother knew of me? All know of Pale Ghost, Lyra replied. Mother was tribe healer. She watched you from far trees, said your plant knowledge was strong. An observer observing the observer. The irony wasn't lost on Arthur. Why did they send you away, Lyra? Where is your father? The child's expression darkened. Father died in great hunt before my remembering. Mother died of throat-burning sickness. Many in tribe now sick. Shaman says mother brought demon curse. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Says I carry curse too. Must leave tribe or all will die. Exiled, cast out to die because of superstition and fear. Arthur's jaw tightened. In 10 years, he'd maintained his scientific objectivity toward the Kayar, observing their culture without judgment. That objectivity vanished in an instant. You're not cursed, he said firmly, and you're not going to die out here. Come inside. It's not safe after dark. He led her into his cave dwelling, closing the camouflaged entrance behind them. Lyra stood awkwardly in the center of the main chamber, her curious gaze taking in the strange environment. Sit, Arthur offered, gesturing to a flat stone near the small fire pit. Are you hungry? She nodded, perching tentatively on the edge of the stone. Arthur prepared a plate of the least exotic foods from his stores, roasted swift meat and a starchy root vegetable that resembled a potato. He'd observed the Kayar eating similar fare. Lyra accepted the food with surprising formality, inclining her head in what Arthur recognized as a gesture of respect among her people. She ate slowly, deliberately, despite her obvious hunger. Tomorrow, Arthur said as she finished her meal, you can tell me more about this sickness. Perhaps I can help. Lyra looked up sharply. You would help the tribe that cast me out? I would help people who are suffering, Arthur corrected, and I would find the truth. Disease isn't a curse or a demon. It's a biological process, something that can be understood and often treated. The concept seemed to confuse her, but she nodded anyway, perhaps too tired to question further. Arthur prepared a sleeping area for her using spare furs and woven mats. She curled up without protest, her small body forming a tight ball, as if to present the smallest possible target to the world. Arthur watched her fall into exhausted sleep, her breathing gradually steadying. He felt a profound sense of disorientation. After a decade of solitude, his carefully ordered existence had been disrupted by this unexpected visitor. Yet instead of anxiety, he felt something he barely recognized, purpose beyond mere survival. He stayed awake long into the night, maintaining his usual vigilance, but now with an added dimension. He was responsible not just for himself, but for this child as well. A child exiled by her own people, just as he had been exiled from his by circumstance and vast interstellar distances. Morning came with Xandria's characteristic abruptness. The planet's rotation gave it short, intense days and long, cold nights. Arthur rose before the first light, checking on Lyra before beginning his daily security and foraging routine. The child still slept, her green features relaxed in a way they hadn't been the previous night. Watching her, Arthur wondered about her mother, the healer who had observed him and taught her daughter human speech. Why had she done that? Had she somehow anticipated this moment, preparing her child for a future exile? Lyra stirred as the first harsh rays of Xandria's sun penetrated the cave. She sat up with a start, momentarily confused by her surroundings. When her gaze found Arthur, recognition dawned, followed by a complex mixture of relief and wariness. "I feared you were a dream," she said simply. "Not a dream," Arthur replied. "Are you hungry?" She nodded, rising gracefully despite her small size. Arthur noticed that she automatically refolded the sleeping furs, arranging them with precise care. As they shared a breakfast of preserved fruits in a tea-like infusion made from a stimulant herb, Arthur broached the subject of her mother's illness. "Tell me about the throat-burning sickness," he said. "When did it start?" Lyra's expression grew solemn. "After tribe moved to New Valley, 3 full moons passed. First the old ones got sick, then hunters. Mother tried to heal them with plants and prayers. She got sick too." She swallowed hard. Mother was strong, fought long, but 2 days ago she could not breathe anymore. And the shaman blamed her, called it a curse? Lyra nodded, her dark eyes glistening. Said Mother's medicine angered the spirits, said she brought bad things from the old valley. When she died, shaman said I must go, or curse would spread through me. Arthur considered this information with his scientist mind. This new valley, does it have different water? A new source? Yes, big lake, blue clear, very beautiful. And everyone drinks from it, bathes in it? Lyra nodded again. Water is life. Tribe always follows water. A hypothesis began forming in Arthur's mind. I need to see this lake, Lyra, and I need samples of the water. You will go to tribe lands? Her voice held disbelief. They will kill Pale One who enters their territory. They might try, Arthur acknowledged, but I don't think it will come to that. He rose, beginning to gather equipment. First, though, I need to teach you some things about surviving here. If something happens to me, you need to know how to live. The next days fell into a new rhythm. Arthur taught Lyra the basics of survival on Xandria. How to identify edible plants. How to set simple traps for small game. How to read weather patterns in the cloud formations. She proved an apt pupil, her mind quick and her memory exceptional. In turn, she shared more about Kiar culture than Arthur had learned in years of distant observation. Their complex familial structures, their seasonal rituals, their mythology that explains Xandria's harsh environment as a testing ground for worthy souls. She also revealed more about herself. She was 9 summers old, young for a Kiar to be separated from family, but not a baby. Her mother had been respected but also viewed with suspicion for her interest in outside ways, which included her observation of Arthur. Lyra had inherited both her mother's curiosity and her somewhat precarious social position. Mother said knowledge is strength, she told Arthur, as they harvested medicinal herbs from a hidden valley. She said different is not wrong, just different. Your mother sounds wise, Arthur replied, carefully cutting leaves from a plant with analgesic properties. She was wise, Lyra agreed, the past tense a painful reminder of her loss. She said Pale Ghost was wise too, said you understand plants like Kiar understand hunting. Arthur smiled slightly. I was a xenobotanist, a plant scientist, before the crash. Studying new life forms was my purpose. What is purpose now? Lyra asked with a child's directness. The question caught Arthur off guard. For years, his purpose had simply been survival. Then, continuing his research despite having no one to share it with. Now? Right now, he said carefully, my purpose is to find out what made your people sick and to keep you safe. Lyra accepted this with a solemn nod. Good purpose. Their third day together brought the first true danger. They had ventured further from the cave than usual, seeking a specific fungus that Arthur believed might help counteract the symptoms of the throat-burning sickness. The fungus grew only in the dampest parts of the forest, where decaying vegetation created the right conditions. "Stay close," Arthur warned as they navigated the increasingly dense undergrowth. "This area attracts predators." Lara nodded, her small hand gripping a knife Arthur had fashioned for her, a defensive weapon sized for her smaller frame. She moved with impressive stealth for one so young, her feet finding secure placement without disturbing the forest floor. They found the fungus growing in abundance around the base of a massive tree-like organism. As Arthur carefully harvested specimens, Lyra kept watch, her large eyes scanning the surrounding foliage with practiced vigilance. "Arthur," she whispered suddenly, freezing in place, "we are not alone." He followed her gaze but saw nothing unusual in the tangled vegetation. Yet he'd learned to trust the superior sensory abilities of the Kayar. "What do you see?" "Not see. Smell." She inhaled deeply through her nose slits. "Root stalkers. 3, maybe 4. Arthur tensed. Root stalkers were among Xandria's deadliest pack hunters, low-slung, six-limbed predators with barbed tails and jaws that could crush bone. They hunted by sound and scent, tracking prey through even the densest undergrowth. "We need to move," he said quietly, packing the fungus samples with swift efficiency. "Slowly, back the way we came." They began a careful retreat, each step measured to avoid creating noise. Arthur led with Lyra close behind him. They had covered perhaps 50 yards when a low, rattling hiss sounded from their left. Arthur saw it then, a ripple of movement in the dense ferns. Then another to their right. The root stalkers were flanking them, using pack tactics to cut off their escape route. "They're hurting us," Arthur realized, "pushing us toward the sink bogs." Lyra's eyes widened. She knew what that meant. The treacherous wetlands, where the ground itself could swallow a victim whole, leaving them to suffocate in liquid mud. "Up," Arthur decided instantly. "They can't climb well. The tree behind us, can you make it to the lower branches?" Lyra nodded, already moving. Her nimble form scaled the rough trunk with impressive speed, finding handholds where Arthur saw none. He followed, his stronger arms compensating for his lesser agility. They had barely cleared the ground when the first root stalker burst from cover, its scale-covered body slamming against the trunk beneath them. 2 more emerged, circling the tree with predatory patience, their barbed tails lashing in anticipation. "They'll wait," Arthur said grimly. "They can go days without food. We can't stay here indefinitely." Lyra studied the surrounding forest, her eyes focusing on details Arthur might have missed. There, she pointed to a network of interlocking branches about 20 feet above them. "We can move through upper trees, like Kayar hunters in dense forest." Arthur assessed the route she indicated. It was risky. The branches weren't designed to hold human weight, and a fall would deliver them directly to the waiting predators. But the alternative was equally dire. "Show me," he said. Lyra moved with surprising confidence, her lighter frame allowing her to traverse branches that sagged dangerously under Arthur's weight. He followed more cautiously, testing each branch before committing his full weight. The root stalkers tracked their movement from below, occasionally leaping up the trunks in frustrated attempts to reach their prey. They had almost reached a clearing where the trees thinned out, potentially allowing them to descend safely beyond the root stalkers' territory, when disaster struck. Arthur reached for a branch that appeared solid but proved rotten at its core. It snapped with a sickening crack, sending him plummeting. He managed to grab another branch during his fall, wrenching his shoulder painfully but arresting his descent about 10 feet above the forest floor in the eagerly waiting root stalkers. The predators went into a frenzy, leaping and snapping at his dangling legs. "Arthur!" Lyra cried from above. "Stay there," he commanded, struggling to pull himself up with one arm, the other temporarily useless from the impact. The branch creaked ominously beneath his weight. A root stalker launched itself with surprising height, its jaws snapping just inches from Arthur's boot. The creature's weight, as it fell back, pulled on the leather, nearly dislodging his precarious grip. "Use your knife," Arthur called to Lyra. "Create a distraction." The child didn't hesitate. She scrambled down to a more secure position and began cutting through a section of branch above the most aggressive root stalker. The branch crashed down, striking the predator and sending it into a confused rage. It turned on its packmates, momentarily creating chaos below. Arthur used the distraction to swing his body toward another, sturdier branch. Pain lanced through his injured shoulder as he hauled himself up, but adrenaline pushed him through it. Secure again, he drew his own knife and cut through the branch the root stalkers were focusing on, sending more debris to confuse the pack. "This way," Lyra called, having spotted a new escape route. She led him through a dense section where two tree forms had grown together, creating a natural bridge over a small ravine. The root stalkers pursued to the edge but stopped, unwilling to attempt the crossing. Arthur and Lyra didn't slow until they'd put significant distance between themselves and the predators. Finally, in a small clearing, they paused to assess the damage. "Let me see," Lyra said, gesturing to Arthur's shoulder with unexpected authority. Mother-taught healing. He allowed her to examine the injury, impressed by her clinical detachment. "Pulled muscle," she diagnosed. "Not broken. Need binding and cold plant." From a pouch at her waist, she produced leaves Arthur recognized as having anti-inflammatory properties. She crushed them between her fingers, releasing their medicinal oils, and applied them to his shoulder before binding it with strips torn from her own clothing. "You saved my life," Arthur said, watching her work with practiced efficiency. Lyra shrugged slightly. "You saved mine first. Fair exchange." The simple statement carried unexpected weight. In that moment of danger, they had functioned not as two lost individuals, but as a team, each compensating for the other's vulnerabilities. Something fundamental had shifted between them. They made their way back to the cave in silence, both processing the implications of what had happened. Only when they were safely inside did Lyra speak again. "Mother said Kiar become true people only when they save another life," she said softly. "Today, I became true people." Arthur nodded, understanding the significance of the milestone in her culture. "You certainly did. You showed great courage." Lyra's expression brightened, pride temporarily displacing grief. "Tomorrow we continue training? I need to learn more, for next danger." "Tomorrow," Arthur agreed, "we continue," and silently added, "and I need to learn from you as well." The next 2 days were devoted to intensive preparation. Arthur's shoulder healed quickly thanks to Lyra's treatment, and they focused on developing strategies for their journey to the Kayar settlement. The Rootstalker encounter had emphasized the dangers of traveling Xandria's wilderness, especially with a child in tow. Arthur modified his equipment for maximum efficiency, creating a smaller bow that Lyra could use effectively and reinforcing their leather armor with additional protection at vulnerable points. They practiced coordinated defense techniques, each adapting to the other's strengths and limitations. Kayar warriors train like this, Lyra observed as they rehearsed a maneuver where she would create a distraction while Arthur moved to a flanking position. Always in pairs, one tricks, one strikes. "It's an effective strategy," Arthur agreed. "Humans call it divide and conquer." "Human word's strange," Lyra said, practicing the unfamiliar phrase. "But idea good." On the 5th day, they began the journey to the Kayar settlement. Arthur packed light but essential gear, weapons, medical supplies, water testing equipment, salvaged from the ship's laboratory section. Lyra carried a small pack with food and additional medical herbs. They traveled cautiously, avoiding the main game trails where predators might lurk. Lyra proved invaluable as a guide, her knowledge of the terrain complementing Arthur's survival skills. Together they moved through Xandria's dangerous landscape with an efficiency neither could have achieved alone. The first day passed without major incident, though they were forced to take shelter in a hollow log during a brief but intense acidic rainfall, one of Xandria's many atmospheric hazards. Pressed together in the confined space, Lyra asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "What is Earth like? Your homeworld?" Arthur considered how to describe a planet that already seemed like a distant dream. "Gentler," he said finally. "The air is easier to breathe. The plants don't try to eat you quite as often. The gravity is lighter, so movement takes less effort." "Sounds weak place," Lyra observed. "How do Earth people become strong without challenge?" The question made Arthur laugh, a rusty sound he barely recognized as his own. "We find plenty of ways to challenge ourselves, believe me. But you're right. Earth doesn't test survival skills the way Xandria does." "You miss Earth?" Arthur sighed. Every day, but missing it doesn't help me here. I had to learn to live on Xandria, not wish for Earth. Lyra nodded, absorbing this philosophy. Like me now, no use missing tribe, must learn new way. Her resilience struck Arthur anew. This child had lost everything, parents, community, cultural identity, yet faced her new reality with determination rather than despair. Many adults, human or Kjar, might not show such strength. As they made camp for the night in a defensible rock formation, Arthur caught Lyra watching him with that same intensity that suggested unasked questions. "What is it?" he prompted, striking sparks to light their small, sheltered fire. "Why do you help tribe that is not your tribe?" she asked. "They have not helped you. They call you Ghost Demon and avoid your lands." Arthur considered the question seriously. "On my world," he began, "there's a concept called humanity. It means more than just being human. It means showing compassion, helping others in need, even when there's nothing to gain." "Kjar have similar word," Lyra said. Takavri means the honorable path. Mother walked to Kavri, said helping weaker ones makes tribes stronger, not weaker. "Your mother and I would have agreed on many things, I think." Lyra smiled, a rare expression that transformed her alien features into something Arthur found surprisingly familiar. "Yes, she would have liked talking with you." The smile faded. "She would have liked me staying with you too." The simple statement carried the weight of their unspoken arrangement. Lyra had nowhere else to go. Arthur had invited her to stay forever, words spoken in a moment of impulse, but which he'd come to embrace. The realization that he was no longer alone in his exile filled him with equal parts anxiety and hope. They had just extinguished their fire for the night when a distant roar shattered the silence. A sound Arthur had never heard before, deep and resonant enough to vibrate the stone beneath them. Lyra's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her small body went rigid with fear, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Death from sky," she whispered, "the swallower of moons." "What is it?" Arthur asked, automatically checking his weapons. "Flying Deathbringer, rarely seen, hunts from high clouds, claws like spear points, wings block stars." She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "We must hide. Deep hide, now." Arthur had learned to trust Lyra's knowledge of Xandria's dangers. If something frightened her this severely, it warranted immediate action. They gathered their gear with practiced efficiency and descended from their elevated position, seeking deeper cover. Lyra led them to a crevice between massive boulders, a space Arthur would have overlooked. They squeezed inside just as another roar sounded, closer this time. Through a narrow opening, Arthur caught a glimpse of something massive moving across the night sky, a silhouette that momentarily blotted out the stars. "What does it hunt?" he whispered. "Anything," Lyra replied, her voice barely audible. "But love's warm blood can smell fear scent from high above." They remained motionless in their hiding place, hardly daring to breathe. The creature passed overhead several times, its massive wings creating downdrafts that stirred the vegetation below. Eventually, the sounds faded as it moved to another hunting ground. "We were lucky," Lyra said as they cautiously emerged. "It was not hungry enough to search hard." "Is it a regular danger?" Arthur asked, already calculating how this would affect their journey. "No, very rare. Bad omen to see one." She hesitated. "Elders say they appear when great changes come, when world shifts." Arthur wasn't superstitious, but he'd been on Xandria long enough to respect local knowledge. "Let's hope the only change coming is healing for your tribe." They resumed their journey at first light, moving with increased caution. The encounter with the flying predator had reinforced the precariousness of their mission. Xandria seemed determined to test their resolve at every turn. Midway through the day, they encountered another obstacle, a river that hadn't appeared on Arthur's mental map of the region. Its waters ran swift and dark, carving a deep channel through the landscape. "This is new," he said, surveying the rushing water with concern. "Was this here when your tribe migrated to the new valley?" Lyra shook her head. "No river here before. Water changes paths on Xandria. Elders say land never sleeps, always moves. Geological instability, another of Xandria's many hazards. The planet's tectonic activity was far more dynamic than Earth's, creating a constantly shifting landscape. Rivers appeared and disappeared, mountains rose and fell, all within time frames measurable in years rather than millennia. We'll need to cross, Arthur decided, after scouting along the bank and finding no narrower points. The current looks manageable, but the depth worries me. Lyra studied the water with natural wariness. Kiar not good swimmers, bodies too dense. I'll carry you across, Arthur said, already fashioning a simple harness from their gear. You'll ride on my back. If I go under, you can use this as a flotation device. He indicated an inflatable bladder made from an animal stomach, treated to be watertight. Lyra nodded, trusting his plan despite her obvious apprehension. They secured their most essential gear in waterproof wrappings and prepared for the crossing. The water hit Arthur like a physical blow, not just cold, but dense somehow, resistant to his movement in a way that suggested higher mineral content than normal. He pushed forward, keeping his footing on the slippery riverbed, Lyra clinging tightly to his back. They were midway across when Arthur felt something brush against his leg. Then again, more insistently. Something lived in this river, and it had noticed them. Hold tight, he warned Lyra, increasing his pace despite the water's resistance. The attack came without further warning, a whip-like tentacle wrapping around Arthur's ankle, trying to pull him under. He fought to maintain his balance, reaching down with his knife to slash at the unseen assailant. More tentacles emerged, seeking purchase on his body. One caught his wrist, another his thigh. The water around them churned as the creature rose from the depths, a mass of writhing appendages surrounding a central maw lined with inward-pointing teeth. "River devil!" Lyra cried, using her own knife to hack at a tentacle that sought to encircle Arthur's neck. Arthur fought with calculated precision despite the danger, identifying the thickest tentacle as the primary one and focusing his attacks there. The creature's grip weakened momentarily, allowing him to lunge forward toward the far bank. But the reprieve was brief. The river devil surged after them, more tentacles replacing those they had severed. One caught Lyra's pack, pulling her backward. She slipped from Arthur's back with a cry of alarm. Arthur spun, grabbing her wrist before the current could separate them further. With his free hand, he drove his knife deep into the tentacle holding her, twisting the blade to inflict maximum damage. The creature released its grip with a subsonic vibration Arthur felt rather than heard. He used the opportunity to pull Lyra against his chest, shielding her with his body as he made a final desperate push toward the shore. They collapsed on the far bank, gasping and shaking. The river devil retreated to deeper water, its tentacles withdrawing beneath the surface. Only then did Arthur realize he was bleeding from multiple puncture wounds where the creature's suckers had attached to his skin. Lyra recovered first, immediately attending to his injuries. "Poison," she said, examining the wounds with concern. "Not death strength, but will cause fever, weakness." She worked quickly, applying a poultice of crushed herbs from her sodden pack. "This slow poison, not stop it. We need stronger medicine." "Is it at the settlement?" Arthur asked, already feeling the first tingles of numbness spreading from the wound sites. Lyra nodded. "Mother kept special plant for river devil poison. Very rare. Grows only near hot springs in North Hills." "Then we keep moving," Arthur said, struggling to his feet. "No time to waste." By nightfall, the poison's effects had progressed. Arthur's vision blurred at the edges, and his coordination suffered. They made camp earlier than planned, unable to continue safely in his condition. Lyra took charge with surprising authority, constructing a shelter and preparing remedies to slow the poison's spread. She mixed a bitter-tasting drink that Arthur forced down, trusting her knowledge of local toxins. "Sleep," she instructed. "I keep watch." "Wake me for second shift," Arthur insisted, though they both knew he needed uninterrupted rest to fight the poison. "Yes," Lyra agreed, though he suspected she had no intention of doing so. "Second shift." As darkness closed in, Arthur drifted into uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with writhing tentacles and the faces of long-dead crewmates. Throughout the night, he was vaguely aware of Lyra's small form moving around their camp, tending the fire, checking his wounds, maintaining vigilance against Xandria's nocturnal threats. He woke to find her still on guard, her young face showing the strain of a sleepless night, but her eyes alert and watchful. "You should have woken me," he said, his voice rougher than usual. You needed healing sleep, she replied simply. How is feeling now? Arthur took inventory of his condition. The numbness had receded somewhat, though weakness remained. His vision had cleared, and the fever had broken during the night. Better, he acknowledged. Your medicine helped. Lyra nodded, satisfied. We reached tribe lands today, before dark. Despite his lingering weakness, they made good progress. Arthur pushed through his discomfort, knowing that delaying would only worsen his condition. The poison needed proper treatment, not just the temporary measures Lyra had employed. By mid-afternoon, they began to see signs of Kayar presence, trail markers, small shrines to local spirits, areas where hunting parties had made camp. Lyra grew increasingly tense as they neared her former home. Tribe will not welcome me, she said softly. Shaman's word is law. They'll have to deal with both of us, Arthur replied, and I'm not easily intimidated by superstition. They reached the outskirts of the Kayar settlement as the sun began its rapid descent toward the horizon. Arthur's first close view of Kayar civilization impressed him despite its primitive nature. Their dwellings, semi-permanent structures of wood, hide, and stone, were arranged in concentric circles around a central gathering space. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and children played in designated areas under the watchful eyes of adults. The idyllic scene contrasted sharply with Lyra's description of superstition and exile, but Arthur knew well how fear could transform even the most ordered societies. We should watch first, he murmured to Lyra as they observed from a concealed position. I need to understand the situation before approaching. Lyra nodded, her expression tight with anxiety. There, she pointed discreetly, the tall one with red markings. That is Gorak, the shaman. Arthur studied the indicated figure, an elderly Kayar with elaborate scarification patterns across his green skin. He moved with deliberate authority, his posture demanding deference from those around him. And there, Lyra continued, the one binding plant leaves. That is Tarvek, Mother's apprentice. He was learning healing before Mother died. The younger Kayar appeared distressed, his movements hurried as he prepared what Arthur recognized as medicinal poultices. Nearby, several Kayar lay on pallets outside a large structure, clearly the sick. The situation has worsened, Arthur observed. More are ill now. Yes, Lyra whispered. Bad signs. No children play near Healing House. Tribe fears spreading sickness. Arthur noted other concerning details. A burial ground with fresh mounds, warriors positioned defensively, the subdued atmosphere of a community in crisis. I need to get closer to the lake, he said. I need water samples. They circled the settlement, keeping to the dense underbrush. The lake Lyra had described came into view, a strikingly beautiful body of water with an unusual bluish clarity. Arthur immediately spotted potential problems. The surrounding rock formations suggested mineral deposits, and several dead fish floated near the shoreline. Stay hidden, he instructed Lyra. I'll collect samples quickly. He approached the water's edge cautiously, testing kit ready. He filled several vials, noting the water's unusual properties, its slight viscosity, its faint metallic odor. Preliminary field tests confirmed his suspicions. Heavy metal contamination, likely naturally occurring, but deadly nonetheless. A sudden shout froze him in place. He turned slowly to find 3 Kayar warriors regarding him with drawn bows. Their expressions reflected shock and fear. The legendary pale ghost materialized at their sacred lake. Arthur raised his hand slowly, speaking in the Kayar language. Not enemy. Come to help. The warriors exchanged uncertain glances. One stepped forward, both still trained on Arthur's chest. What help can demon bring? You bring more death to Kayar. Not death, knowledge. Arthur gestured carefully toward the lake. Water sick. Makes Kayar sick. The lead warrior's eyes narrowed in suspicion. Shaman says sickness is curse from angering spirits. Not spirits, science. Arthur struggled with the limited vocabulary he had learned. Poison in water, can prove. Before the warrior could respond, a commanding voice called from behind them. The warriors straightened as the shaman, Gorak, approached, flanked by additional guards. The old Kayar regarded Arthur with undisguised hostility. The pale abomination shows itself at last, he said in surprisingly good human speech. Come to witness the suffering you have brought us? Arthur met his gaze steadily. I've brought nothing but knowledge. Your people are dying from heavy metal poisoning, toxins in the lake water. I can help if you'll let me. The shaman's expression darkened. You speak with a forked tongue, Pale One. The sickness is a spiritual affliction, sent because we tolerated the heretical practices of our former healer. You mean Lyra's mother? Arthur kept his voice level. The woman who tried to save your people while you peddled superstition? A dangerous silence fell. The warriors tensed, awaiting the shaman's command. Gorak's face contorted with rage. You dare speak of our ways? You, an outsider, a creature of unknown origin. He turned to the warriors. This confirms what I have foretold. The pale demon has emerged from hiding to claim more victims. Kill it now before its poison spreads further. The warriors raised their bows but hesitated, their fear of the legendary pale ghost temporarily overriding their obedience. Wait! A new voice cut through the tension. Tarvek, the healer's apprentice, pushed through the group. Great shaman, wisdom demands we hear the outsider's words. If there is knowledge that might save our people, should we not at least listen? Gorak rounded on the younger Kiar. You question my authority? You who learned from the woman whose actions brought this plague upon us? I question nothing, Great One, Tarvek said carefully. I seek only to fulfill my duty to heal. If this stranger offers a different path to healing, my oath requires I consider it. The diplomatic response seemed to mollify the shaman slightly. He turned back to Arthur with contempt. Speak your false knowledge then, Pale One, before we cleanse our land of your presence forever. Arthur recognized his opportunity. Your people began falling ill after moving to this valley, correct? After drinking from this lake? Reluctant nods from several warriors confirmed this. The water contains toxic metals, natural elements that poison the body slowly. They accumulate in tissue, causing burning sensations, breathing difficulties, and eventually death. Arthur held up his testing kit. This can prove what I'm saying, and I know how to filter the water, make it safe again. More alien magic, Gorak scoffed. Why would you help us, creature? We who have avoided you for a decade? Because helping those in need is the right thing to do, Arthur said simply. On my world, we call it humanity. An unexpected voice joined the conversation. Kiar call it Takavri, the honorable path. All eyes turned to see Lyra emerging from the underbrush, her small form straight and dignified despite the gasps of shock from the gathered Kiar. The cursed child returns, Gorak hissed. Guards, seize her. No, Arthur moved protectively toward Lyra, but Tarvek intervened, placing himself between the child and the warriors. Great shaman, the child shows no signs of sickness, despite living with her mother throughout her illness. If the sickness were a curse, would it not have claimed her too? The logical argument gave the warriors pause. Arthur pressed the advantage. Let me demonstrate the truth. Bring 2 vessels, one filled with water from the lake, one with water from your previous settlement. After a tense deliberation, Gorak grudgingly allowed the test. Arthur used his equipment to show the dramatic difference between the samples, explaining in simple terms how the toxins affected the body. The visual evidence, a dramatic color change in the contaminated water when a reagent was added, made a strong impression on the gathered Kiar. This proves nothing, Gorak insisted, though with less conviction. Tricks of light and color. Then explain why none of your traditional remedies have worked, Arthur challenged. Why the sickness affects those who drink the most water first, the elderly and active hunters. Why animals near the lake are dying too. Murmurs spread through the growing crowd of Kiar. Arthur saw doubt replacing fear in their expressions. Tarvek spoke again, addressing both the shaman and his people. I have tried every healing method passed down by our ancestors. Nothing stops the burning sickness. If this outsider offers a new path, Aso, as acting healer, must advocate we try it. The direct challenge to Gorak's authority hung in the air. For a moment, Arthur thought the shaman might order an immediate attack. Instead, the old Kiar's shoulders slumped slightly, the burden of watching his people die, perhaps finally outweighing his pride. "What do you propose, Pale One?" he asked, his voice heavy with reluctant concession. "First, stop drinking the lake water immediately. Second, I can show you how to construct filtration systems to remove the toxins. Third, I have medicines that may help those already affected." A new commotion interrupted the negotiation. Shouts of alarm came from the village center. A warrior ran toward them, his expression panicked. "Great Shaman, the Blue Death approaches. It has entered the eastern boundary." Arthur turned to Lyra. "Blue Death?" "Shadow Cat," she whispered. "Largest predator in these lands. Blue fur, 6 legs, teeth like spear points. Very rare. Very deadly." The Kayar warriors mobilized immediately, racing back toward the settlement. Arthur and Lyra followed, with Gorak and Tarvek close behind. The scene that greeted them justified the panic. A massive feline creature, easily 3 times the size of an earth tiger, prowled between the outer dwellings. Its 6 muscular limbs moved with unnatural coordination, and its blue fur shimmered with an almost metallic quality. Most disturbing were its eyes, clouded and unfocused, suggesting disease or madness. "It's been drinking the lake water too," Arthur realized aloud. "The toxins have affected its brain, driving it into inhabited areas it would normally avoid." The Kayar warriors formed a defensive line, their spears and bows at the ready, but Arthur could see their fear. The Blue Death was the apex predator of Xandria, a creature that featured prominently in Kayar mythology as an agent of divine punishment. The beast roared, a sound that vibrated through Arthur's chest, and charged the warrior line. 2 Kayar fell immediately, their bodies tossed aside like toys. The others attacked with coordinated precision, but their weapons seemed to barely penetrate the creature's thick hide. "Their weapons are too light," Arthur muttered. "They need something that can penetrate deeper." Without conscious decision, he found himself moving forward, drawing his own spear, the reinforced shaft tipped with a blade fashioned from the horizon's hull metal. Lyra called after him, but he was already running, analyzing the creature's movement patterns with the detached clarity that extreme danger sometimes brought him. The Shadow Cat whirled to face this new threat, recognizing perhaps that Arthur was different from the Kayar, a new type of prey to evaluate. It crouched, powerful muscles bunching for another charge. Arthur stood his ground, spear braced. "Come on then," he whispered. "Let's dance." The creature lunged with frightening speed. Arthur dove aside at the last possible moment, driving his spear into the beast's flank as it passed. The blade penetrated deeper than the Kayar weapons had, drawing a screech of pain and rage. The Shadow Cat rounded on him, blood matting its blue fur. Arthur retreated, keeping his eyes locked on the predator. This was not his first encounter with Xandria's deadly fauna, but never had he faced something of this magnitude. "I need higher ground," he called to the nearest warriors, "and I need a distraction." To his surprise, they responded immediately, several breaking off to flank the creature while others gestured toward a partially constructed watchtower. Arthur sprinted for it, the beast's roars spurring him to greater speed. He scrambled up the wooden framework, reaching a platform about 15 feet above the ground. The height gave him a crucial vantage point, allowing him to track both the Shadow Cat and the Kayar warriors' positions. The predator had focused again on the larger group of Kayar, perhaps considering them easier prey. It charged again, scattering warriors but failing to catch any in its massive jaws. Arthur noticed something, a pattern in its movements. Despite its ferocity, the creature was favoring its right side. An old injury perhaps, or a neurotoxic effect of the water contamination. Either way, it was a weakness he could exploit. "Tarvek!" he shouted, spotting the healer's apprentice among the defenders. "I need rope, as much as you have." The young Kayar understood immediately, dispatching runners to fetch the requested items. Meanwhile, Arthur called directions to the warriors, coordinating their movements to keep the beast contained within a narrowing perimeter. When the ropes arrived, Arthur quickly fashioned a simple but effective trap, a variant of snares he'd used on smaller game, scaled up and reinforced. He positioned Kayar warriors at strategic points, explaining his plan in rapid, simplified terms. The Shadow Cat grew increasingly enraged as its attacks yielded no prey. Its movements became more erratic, another sign of toxin-induced neurological damage. "Now," Arthur signaled, and the trap was sprung. Warriors pulled on concealed ropes, causing a deadfall of heavy logs to crash down on the creature's hindquarters. It wasn't enough to kill the beast, but it momentarily pinned it in place. Arthur didn't hesitate. He leapt from the platform, spear positioned for a killing strike. Time seemed to slow as he fell, his target the vulnerable spot at the base of the creature's skull, where he'd observed a gap in its protective fur. The impact jarred every bone in his body. His spear drove deep into the beast's neck, severing its spinal cord. The shadow cat convulsed once, then collapsed, its massive body shuddering into stillness. Silence fell over the village. Arthur rolled clear of the dead predator, breathing heavily, aware of dozens of Kiar eyes fixed upon him in disbelief. Slowly, one warrior approached, then another. Not with weapons raised, but with expressions of awe. One touched the shadow cat's body tentatively, as if confirming it was truly dead. "The Pale One has slain the Blue Death," someone whispered, the words spreading through the gathered crowd. Arthur rose unsteadily, looking for Lyra. He found her standing with Tarvek, her small face alight with a complex mixture of pride and relief. Gorak approached last, his previous hostility replaced by wary respect. "No Kayar has ever killed a Blue Death alone," he said grudgingly. "Our legends say only a great chief can accomplish such a feat." Arthur met his gaze steadily. "I didn't do it alone. Your warriors helped set the trap. We worked together." The shaman seemed to struggle with this concept, his worldview visibly shifting. Finally, he inclined his head slightly, a significant concession from one of his status. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "there is wisdom in the ways of the Pale One. Perhaps his knowledge of the water sickness should be heard as well." The aftermath unfolded with surprising swiftness. With the immediate threat of the shadow cat eliminated and the shaman's reluctant blessing, Arthur set to work implementing water filtration systems based on technologies he'd developed for his own use. Tarvek proved an eager student, quickly grasping the scientific principles behind the contamination and its treatment. The sickest Kiar began to recover once they stopped consuming the toxic water and received treatments from Arthur's medical supplies. Those who had been exposed longest would likely bear permanent effects, but the tribe as a whole would survive. Throughout it all, Lyra remained by Arthur's side, serving as interpreter and cultural guide. The Kiar's initial wariness of her, the cursed child, gradually gave way to acceptance as her mother's name was cleared of blame for the sickness. A week after the shadow cat's attack, as Arthur packed his equipment for the return journey to his cave dwelling, Gorak approached him alone. "Your knowledge has saved many Kiar lives," the shaman acknowledged. "The tribe would not look unfavorably upon the child's return. Her place could be restored." Arthur glanced to where Lyra was helping younger Kiar children learn which plants were safe to touch, already taking on a teaching role similar to her mother's. "That's for Lyra to decide," he replied. "She has a home with me for as long as she wants it." Gorak studied him with ancient, knowing eyes. "The Pale One has been alone many seasons. This is not good for any thinking being." The simple truth of the statement caught Arthur off guard. "No," he agreed quietly, "it's not." When the time came to depart, Arthur found Lyra waiting at the village boundary, her few possessions already packed. "You could stay," he told her. "Your people would accept you now." Lyra looked back at the settlement, then to Arthur. "They are not my people anymore," she said with a child's directness. "You are my people now." The statement should have frightened him, the responsibility it entailed, the fundamental reordering of his solitary existence. Instead, Arthur felt a weight lifting, a decade of isolation giving way to something new. "Then let's go home," he said, offering his hand. Lyra took it without hesitation. As they walked away from the village, a warrior called after them. Arthur turned to see the entire tribe had gathered to witness their departure. As one, the Kiar raised their spears in salute, not to Arthur alone, but to both of them together. The journey back seemed shorter somehow, the dangers of Xandria less oppressive. They walked in comfortable silence for much of the way, two survivors united by circumstance and choice. When the familiar outline of the Razor Mountains appeared on the horizon, Arthur felt a strange sensation. Not the vigilant tension that usually accompanied his return to territory he could defend, but something warmer. For the first time in 10 years, he was not just returning to shelter, but bringing someone home. Will you teach me more about plants? Lyra asked as they climbed the path to the cave. Like Mother was learning? I'll teach you everything I know, Arthur promised. And you can teach me about your people's healing traditions. Together, we might discover things neither of us could learn alone. Lyra smiled, that transformation of alien features into something unexpectedly familiar. Mother would like that. She always said different knowledge makes stronger knowing. At the cave entrance, Arthur paused, letting Lyra enter first, a symbolic acknowledgement that this was now her home too. She moved with growing confidence through the chamber that had been his solitary domain for so long. He followed, realizing that Xandria, for all its harshness, had given him something unexpected. Not just the challenge of survival, but now the opportunity for connection. A second chance at belonging, fashioned from exile and loss. Tomorrow, he said, we'll start expanding this place, make a proper home for two. Lyra nodded seriously. For family, she corrected. Yes, Arthur agreed, the word both strange and right on his tongue. For family. Outside, Xandria's sun began its rapid descent, shadows lengthening across the twisted landscape. Night would come soon, bringing its own dangers. But within the cave, a small fire burned steadily, pushing back the darkness, illuminating two figures, different species, unlikely companions, united against a hostile world. Not just survivors anymore, a family.